All right, I'm going to go ahead and get everything started. Kevin, I see your screen and I think we're all set to go. I'd like to welcome everyone to the webinar series, Push and Pull for Talent, Insights from Talent Management Leaders. The National Center for Healthcare Leadership is joined today by First Group and Newbrick Partners, and we are really excited to be presenting this two-part webinar series today. I should introduce myself. My name is Melanie Standish, and I am a program coordinator and researcher at the National Center for Healthcare Leadership, and it's my honor to offer this webinar today. Kevin, if you can move to the next slide. I mentioned briefly before we get started that our Human Capital Investment Conference is upcoming on November 16th through 20th. We will be joined by our friends at First Group, and we encourage everyone to register. Registration ends Monday, November 9th, 2020. Next slide, please. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our webinar and our speakers, Push and Pull for Talent, Insights from Talent Management Leaders. I'll briefly introduce our amazing speakers for today. We have Deanna Banks, Tim Frischman, and Kevin Ruddy. Deanna Banks is a trusted talent advisor with more than 25 years of experience as a human capital consultant and thought leader on diversity. She's primarily worked with incredible hospitals and health systems and other health entities across the country. We also have another principal at First Group, Tim Frischman. He's had 26 years of experience in transforming leadership teams through recruitment, retention, and other organizational development strategies. And finally, we have Kevin Ruddy, trusted by his clients to address C-suite leadership needs in their organization. He has a special emphasis on advancing the ability of healthcare organizations to move to true population health management. I would like to highlight that my dog's in the background, and I apologize. I'm also very excited about today's webinar. So I'm going to turn it over to Kevin Ruddy and hope that my technical challenges are the end of this presentation's technical challenges.
Thank you very much, Melanie. We appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I have some of those technical challenges today too. For those of you on the line, I had a computer crash about an hour before this webinar. So if you see things get a little funky, I'm really trying to do my best. I'm happy to be here on behalf of First Group and be invited by NCHL. I'm joined by my colleagues, as you heard, Deanna and Tim. Today, we are actually looking forward to sharing with you some from our combined experience of talking to thousands of healthcare executives over our each close to 20 or more year careers. A bit of a model that we've put together that helps us and helps candidates think about their choices and how they make decisions around career opportunities. For the purposes of this seminar, I think it might be good for all of us as attendees and participants to think about ourselves as individuals as we work through this model and how these aspects come into play as we make our own decisions about our careers. And then for those of you who are leading and helping and mentoring others to be able to apply this to those folks that you help in these decisions. We hope you'll find value in this framework today. The push and pull of this really is we as executive search consultants kind of push people to think about opportunities maybe outside their current organizations. That's not our goal today. And then the pull is you as individual leaders keeping those high potential, very valuable employees, all employees, engaged and so that they can thrive and flourish in your environment. So that creates a bit of a distance for them. Before we jump over to the professional algorithm, it might be worth just taking a few minutes to think about why this is so important and what are some of the factors that are creating stress around this discussion and people engaged in these discussions. I think we're all facing a lot of uncertainty today, if not even some uncharted waters as it relates to our work environments and keeping our people engaged. There's been a war on talent, a phrase coined in 1997 that really was around how incredibly complex and difficult it was becoming, especially as we globalize, to keep our employees and attract and retain new employees. That's been over 23 years ago. A lot's changed since then. Today, we would say it's not just challenging, it's very hard and sometimes really complex. some of the things that come into play as we think about stimuli and top of mind priorities for us today are, there's a very heightened awareness around the need for diverse talent. How do we retain them? How do we recruit them, bring them into our organizations, and keep diverse talent engaged? We've all had quite a year with COVID-19 and its impact on our operations, our safety, how our employees are engaging lots of times in a virtual environment. And what does that mean for employee engagement and people's alignment with your culture and ability to stay connected? We're in the industry of healthcare. There's probably not many more complex industries than healthcare. We have seen rapid change even before COVID started. And I would say that, that pace of change is likely to ratchet up even more as time goes on. Another consideration that we need to look at is generational differences in the workforce. For those of us who've been in the workforce for decades, let's just say, we need to stop and take a look at what do the younger generations want and need from workforce. My 23-year-old daughter, who just started her career as a nurse this last couple of weeks, said to me, "Dad, I'm a millennial." I don't even know what that is. I think I need to Google that. So we need to make sure that we're keeping these folks engaged and attracting them to the opportunity and letting them flourish and thrive. The cost of turnover, as we know, is very expensive. And I'll stop with this, but we've seen a recent survey that if an executive turns in your organization, that could lead to about a 213% of their base salary cost and impact. And not only are you losing, hopefully, who has been a very successful and helpful person in your organization, you could have impact on revenue, you could have impact on intellectual capital. There could be collateral damage that happens with people around that person who have leaned into or as a mentor or trainer. So there's just a lot of different factors that go into this. So today, our tool that we are going to advance is something that I give Tim Frischman, my colleague, a lot of credit for. We call it the professional assessment algorithm. And it really breaks into 4 major areas or quadrants, which we'll get to here in a second. This is a very individualized model. So when you think about the 4 quadrants, there are, every person will have sort of the uniqueness of their own fingerprint, if you will, as they go through the discussions, thinking about what is the opportunity at hand, whether that's internal or external, beyond the job description, what are the other things, and we'll discuss this, that really come into play in making this decision. Then there's geography, which in today's world is a little less impactful because there's so much virtual work, but when we come out of the pandemic, if someone's looking externally and it requires a relocation, what does that mean? All these things are very interdependent. Compensation, total reward, so beyond annual cash compensation, what are the other things that are really attractive to a candidate as they consider internal, external opportunities? And the 4th area we'll discuss is timing. So at this point, I'd like to kind of hand off to Tim and have him sort of give us a higher level overview of each of these areas, and then we'll come back and sort of unpack them. So Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin, and great to meet everyone, and thank you for joining. I think Kevin did a very good job of just kind of teeing up the ideas or some of the key areas within this area, within the algorithm. I think there's a few things that we would want to stress. I've yet to come up with a better word than algorithm. The concern with it is it implies rigidity. So please know, as Kevin identified, every individual will have their own personal situation. And it's not meant to be rigid. It's really more of a fluid situation around what's going on with them at a moment in time. And it doesn't necessarily mean that their algorithm will change from one day to the next, but there can be personal or professional events that go on in one's life that could alter the way that they think about their professional algorithm. The other is the framework for this is meant to be for all of you as you think about the engagement of your associates on conversations around retention, as well as you may be interviewing and candidates for recruitment. To better and fully appreciate kind of what this means, I want to stop for a moment and ask you to just personalize this as it relates to how you think about and how you're managing your own career. At any given point in time, you've likely gotten calls from someone like us. Somebody's presented an opportunity, and you may have 7, you may have a dozen things that you would say you evaluate for before you're going to be comfortable saying, I'm either interested in or I would ultimately accept going to do that. We don't argue that there's more than 4, but we do look at these 4 because while each one of them may be individual and independent in how you'll evaluate the situation, there is an interdependence among them. So how you view one area could actually impact how you might actually view another. So as we think about opportunity, opportunity is ultimately going to be, how proud might you be to tell people you work for that company? How energized are you going to be by working with that group of people? And ultimately, how passionate are you going to be to take on the charge at hand? And it's title agnostic. And so there are a lot of people who circle around others in terms of what that may mean, but really that is very personalized. And it's personalized to who you are, where you are in your career, but ultimately you will be evaluating it. Separate from that, but actually in equal weight in the decision of would I do that or not, is geography. And as Kevin described, in this COVID environment, geography is taking on an entirely different framework. There's the, is the role going to require me to move? If they say I don't need to move, but ultimately I'll have to travel, so what's the travel cadence going to look like and how sustainable is it? And then there's the virtual nature. So now we have a virtual component to geography. Yet again, separate from those two is compensation and total rewards. Every individual's personal situation demands that there's a lifestyle that's involved. There's an annual cash compensation by which they just, if they don't make it, they're just not going to make that decision. So there is a economic reality in how people make these decisions. And then timing is a little bit of a dual component, in that timing isn't I'm busy at work, because at the levels that we're working, everybody's busy. Timing from a personal standpoint can be, are there significant others? What's going on with their career? Are there children? Are they in the house? How old are they? Are they school age? Are there aging parents? So there's all these things that go into, is this the right time personally to explore making a move? On the professional side, there is, I just got promoted. Maybe I didn't get promoted. Are companies contemplating selling the division I'm in? Or maybe you're involved in a major project. So there's the career aspect of it. So I realize it sounds rigid, but to put it into perspective is, what we know is that 3 of these 4 things can absolutely exceed someone's expectations. But if any one of these 4, and it doesn't matter which one, would ultimately fall below a pass-fail threshold of what that person may deem to be acceptable, the opportunity is not going to work. So as you think about your own situations and how you've evaluated opportunities coming to you as it relates to this, what it does is it gives you an ability to, and arms you with the ability to be more empathetic with your individual team members, because you know that they're likely having the same pull. As Kevin said, they're getting calls from us, what's keeping them engaged. If you're recruiting someone, outside of the traditional set of interview questions, do know that these are 4 forces that are at work, and they're things that you will absolutely want to be exploring, because it will help identify, are there downstream risks associated with actually being able to add that individual to your team. So again, I think the empathy factor is, as you personalize it and you understand how this may have played out in your career, it just creates a heightened sense of awareness about what you might be looking for and what may be going on with your associates. So with that, Kevin, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you, Tim. What I'd like to do now, Tim and Deanna, is kind of move into these individual quadrants, starting with opportunity. And Deanna, just a question to kind of get us started. As you think about the opportunity, certainly when we're talking with candidates or we're looking at our own choices, there's a job description. There's a function that needs to be taken care of or a set of responsibilities in an organization. That can be pretty straightforward. But what are some of the other things that you have conversations with candidates about that come into this quadrant of thinking and decision making?
Yeah, great question, Kevin. As you think about that, I think a number of candidates, obviously, you first and foremost, as you described, think about the particular technical competencies around the role, but beyond that, culture plays a significant part in that equation. I would say even more so today, and it continues to increase in its impact. If you think about the current social unrest in this country and how that is impacting how people think about, as Tim mentioned earlier, do I feel like I feel good working for this organization? Am I proud to be working with this organization? Many people are sitting back taking inventory of the organization, not only the role that they play within the organization, its potential impact. Many also think about the greater good beyond what it's doing with their individual. Am I feeling like this organization took a particular position, perhaps when some of the social unrest began, that I'm proud of or that I feel like aligns with my own personal values and culture? Is critically important. Also, as you just think about, the potential also to make an impact within your communities. We've had a number of conversations with leaders who continue to say, I realize what we've done is very powerful, but I have a personal desire to align what I do professionally and our ability to have a broader impact in the community. And so there's a lot of questions there. I also think too, as you think about the opportunity, as you think about growth, there's a lot of things we've talked about before, potential glass ceilings. In our organization, we talk about a horizontal ceiling. What if you and your superior perhaps are chronologically similar age? That person seems to be very satisfied in his or her role. And you may have some concern about potential upward mobility or career growth. So many of those things can play into that opportunity piece of the equation, Kevin.
Great, thank you. And Tim, from your perspective, anything else that you'd like to add, or maybe recent conversations, especially given our current environment, that would play into considering the opportunity segment of this decision-making model?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add, I thought Deanna made some really good points. This goes back to your fingerprint. There's a lot of people who will be speaking to candidates, giving them counsel, giving them advice, telling them what they think they should be doing. In the end, it really boils down to that individual employee or that individual to really do a deep assessment of where they are most energized and where they feel most rewarded. And ultimately, it doesn't necessarily have to be exactly the way others design it. So maybe they've been in an entrepreneurial organization, but what they really resonate with is a mission with the likes of so many who are on the call today. Or is it the size of the company? Is it the type of role? And this gets into really getting to know your associate and how deeply engaged and connected are they with what's being done and why, and what are you looking for in terms of any signs of them becoming somewhat disconnected with either their work or the culture or the mission. And then when you're speaking with potential candidates coming into the organization, a couple of really thoughtfully selective, behaviorally based questions around work environment, work preferences, where they're energized, will really help you flesh out, where this person sits and whether or not who you are and what you represent. Is there something that you're sensing is a clear alignment with who they are?
Yeah. Great point.
Great. One last question on this. We've seen so much consolidation in our industry, whether today we're seeing it really in health systems back, over the course of time. Tim and Deanna, we've seen it in the payer sector, one of the sectors we do work in. Any special considerations as an organization goes through a merger in terms of how people might view an opportunity? You've got potentially a new leadership team. There's I think for people to really need to trust that they have strong leadership that's interested and aligned around the values. Any other thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Kevin. I think that trust factor is significant. I think in all situations, kind of twofold. You ask around the M&A piece. I think most immediately, if you think about any potential M&A joint venture, there's always often a duplication of roles. Perhaps there's a restructuring within the organization that is now impacting your view on your career growth, that may all of a sudden put you in a position where you may be kind of pushed to consider other opportunities when you may not have had a plan for that. I also think as you just talk about how this kind of plays together, also just thinking about organizations where you could have been in a role where you were directly reporting into senior leadership. A restructure now has you in more of a, 2 levels down from the organization, away from decision making, where you may feel like I no longer have a voice at the table and I'm no longer having impact. All those things clearly would play into a person's perception of their value and worth within an organization, and also how that may align with their own career goals and aspirations. Kevin, what it also made me think about too, I think, Tim, you alluded to it when we talked about, if I'm working in a for-profit, I want to get in a not-for-profit. I think organizations, many individuals now are looking at organizations with a different lens, especially as you think about, its current impact. Do I want to continue to align myself with a for-profit entity? Do I feel like I'd rather now go pivot in another quadrant within my career and life and maybe do something that is more mission oriented? That is where we see a lot of those shifts and changes take place as a person evolves in one's career to kind of make those decisions.
Great. Well, thank you. I want to remind our audience too, there's a Q&A section button in this Zoom platform that you can use to submit questions as we're going through the conversation. Let's move over to geography. Again, lots of impacts because of COVID, those kinds of things. So, Tim, as we've gone to much more of a virtual environment, at least temporarily, and who knows for how long, what have you seen candidates talking about? What have you seen in terms of people's willingness to think differently about the geography piece?
Yeah, this is so interesting because of the current situation. I think that it's really causing a lot of clients to start to really think through what will life be like as COVID starts to pass. In so many cases, we still have clients where everybody's working virtually. They're not even going into the office. We have other clients where they're closer to the actual delivery of care, where they still have executives or, critical workers going on site. I think the purpose of the algorithm, both in your retention as well as on the recruitment side, is to recognize that as individuals, everybody's going to have preferences and or limitations. So if you are in a location or you have a culture whereby you will expect or do expect that there are individuals and they have to physically move to that community, know that from our seat, that is probably one of the single greatest challenges we face in all of the conversations, is working through either the openness to a particular geography, or probably more broadly stated, where is that person and what is their openness to relocate in general? So, oftentimes people would assume it's about a particular geography. Sometimes it is, but more often than not, it's just the discomfort and the unsettledness that goes with geography in general. We are also seeing both candidates and clients alike trying to figure out, what does this transition look like from virtual to when they open the office, but yet I haven't relocated there? Because as you think about that sequence and the flexibility that's going to be needed between organization and individual alike, is you may actually start virtually, they may open up the office, but yet your family hasn't been able to move because of COVID. Now you're going to need to start commuting. What does that look like? So what I would say is, at least until things settle a little bit, this will continue to be a topic, but it will call for you to just have very open, thoughtful, flexible conversations around the fact that there is going to be a great deal of ambiguity for individuals, their situation, and how this may play out from one organization to the next. But inevitably, I think the times have created this one to even be a little bit more in flux than what we've even seen in the past.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's why I think we're all kind of seeing it. It's always a top of mind conversation when we're approaching candidates about opportunities. Deanna, I know you and I have talked recently about some trends, and I think you personally made a move based on geography because you've worked virtually for 23 years. You have a lot of flexibility there, but I think, there have been some trends and discussions that have been prevalent over the last 7 to 8 months around people's reasons for making a move.
Agree. And I would say, Kevin, not even just in the last 7 to 8 months. Tim and I have talked about this is something we've seen afoot probably for the last, I'd say 18 months, almost 2 years, where some of the for-profit national health plans had been looking at the challenge and sometimes the level of stress that it put on some of their leaders to require that they relocate to take promotional opportunities into new markets, and have been slowly but surely easing some of the requirements on some of their senior leaders that were requiring they move in order to take a promotion within the organization. That allowed them to obviously stay in a geography, get kids through certain levels of school, and still retain that talent within the organization. That trend, I think, coupled with the fact of what we see happening now with COVID, and organizations really realizing that the productivity and value to one's organization is not minimized or diminished by a person's ability to work virtually, I think is going to change dramatically. What we've also seen is I think an immediate response to some of this, where traditionally we had people flocking to want to only work in major metropolitan cities where, had access to appropriate resources and culture that they felt aligned with what their personal needs are. We now see people expressing interest in moving out of some of the more densely populated areas and looking to move in more suburban, perhaps even rural areas, which I think is exciting, because for many leaders who may have been a bit challenged to recruit talent to some of these markets, I think they're going to have an opportunity to look at new talent, and people are drawn for different things. I think additionally, the fact that you can potentially work virtually, also people are questioning, is the cost of living such in a particular market? I now may want to look into other areas. Or for me, it was a combination of geography and timing, where now that I'm an empty nester and my children are grown, it provided my husband and I an opportunity to make a transition that we took advantage of.
Great. Good. All right, well, let's transition to talk about the topic we all love, compensation and total rewards. And we know, again, we've mentioned earlier that, we think about compensation as a base, a potential annual incentive of some sorts, or long-term incentives. So there's cash compensation, but there's so much more to it. So Deanna, as we talk about total rewards, what are the factors that you're hearing that are becoming very important, or that we should consider as we are attracting or retaining talent beyond sort of that base and bonus cash?
Yeah. Kevin, as we think about total rewards, I really do get into there's monetary aspects of that, and there are non-monetary benefits, especially so with the millennial generation. There's a lot of talk about work-life balance, and those are really critically important, valuable benefits. As you know, organizations invest a lot of money into benefits, and it's just a critical component, especially if I think about a lot of our NCHL peer member organizations who are within an academic medical center realm. Many of the tuition benefits offered by academic medical centers have been a rich benefit that they and or their offspring could take advantage of, and for many years was a significant differentiator in that space. What I would also say is, as organizations think about it, some organizations, if you've got a tenure over a decade long, they're offering sabbaticals. People looking to kind of think about, what else can I do? Can I take a break and then kind of come back refreshed, do research, kind of do some, extended travel is also very attractive in many organizations. As we think about the organization and other things that we see them offering when it comes to benefits, reinvesting not only for a tuition reimbursement benefit for themselves to kind of go back to school is also important. But I think the opportunity in some environments where you can do research, maybe partner, go work with another organization, take advantage of a fellowship, are all some unique things that we see organizations now beginning to put on the table to provide more flexibility and greater rewards outside of the monetary benefits of a role, realizing that those non-monetary pieces are equally important as compensation to a younger generation versus, our generation. It was about work and technically the commerce side of the equation.
Right. And Tim, from your perspective, I know we've had conversations around, really the difference between what that family's baseline needs are to keep a lifestyle, and then all the other pieces that might come on top of that would just be additional attractors or potential detractors if they're not present. So what are some of the things that you wanted to mention in this space?
Yeah, Kevin, great point. And, maybe just, digressing just for a moment on just how the algorithm works. For those who are just hearing our discussion, what you're finding is that there are trade-offs. If somebody needs to relocate, their expectations of what the opportunity may need to look like and ultimately what the compensation they would expect may be different if the role didn't require relocation. So I just use that as in a moment to just kind of describe the trade-offs that we see play out in our world. So with compensation, I think there's a couple of things that I want to highlight from my experience is individual family and their lifestyles that establish what I'll call their family burn rate really does establish the floor by which, obviously somebody can accept a role that they would not be able to day in and day out be able to make and address the needs of their family. Generally speaking, people want to be linearly greater from one year to the next, but the world doesn't necessarily always work that way for people, nor do how they make career changes does that necessarily have to be the case. But when everything's said and done, there is a dollar amount that most individuals just are either willing to move for or not willing to move for. And it's not always clear, nor is in today's environment, as we all know with the compensation equity laws that are changing, we're really changing everything to an expectation-based discussion, as opposed to historically, it was far easier for us to talk about where they are today and go from there. I think for the group, that one thing that I would highlight is I'm oftentimes truly surprised by how little senior level leaders and just leaders in general are able to quantify the value of their total rewards. So there's a lot of time, there's a lot of expense that goes into the overall total rewards package that inevitably leaders oftentimes are not able to place a value on. So they do miss some of the true components that maybe would be more retention driven or attractiveness for outside candidates. So just be conscious that your total rewards and the values of those, do everything you can to make sure that those are really clear so that somebody knows exactly what that looks like.
Yeah.
That's a great point, Tim. I think sometimes we do, they may even look at, what they're paying for, what we're paying for, insurance premiums for some of the health and dental, those kinds of things. But there are, a lot of organizations who offer, as Deanna mentioned, tuition or other kinds of not specific cash compensation, but that are part of the rewards. And I think the other thing is just if you are motivated by recognition and those kinds of things, just how your organization is handling those kinds of things for people's personal and professional accomplishments.
Yeah, Kevin, I think that comes out even a bit more when you think about some of the academic medical centers, or you think about some of the more traditional delivery organizations and the push for innovation, and where are you getting talent that will give you confidence that they are innovating. They may be coming from either entrepreneurial situations, they may be coming from other large, maybe more for-profit driven, just based on some of the experiences they have. So as you're evaluating and assessing them, not only for the opportunity side of this grid, but know that you're going to be exposed to a lot of different economic models, compensation models that they're being exposed to. So to be able to kind of build those bridges as they're maybe going to have to forego equity and actually lean into the value of total rewards, it just know that may not always be a clear trade-off without being able to put some tangible dollars or substance behind some of the total rewards pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in my experience over the last 10 years, with Move to Population Health, the Affordable Care Act, accountable care organizations, we've seen a lot of provider systems go and want to hire payer experienced people, especially those who are very attuned around risk and pricing and what do contracts look like, how do we successfully take risk. Many of those candidates have come from for-profit health plans. or services industries that support those health plans that offer equity. So there's a big delta between where they are and what some provider organizations have expected to pay and what the market really bears and shows. So it's been a bit of a journey. I think the shock of that has sort of worn off over the last few years, but it continues to be, something that we work with on a regular basis.
Yeah. Kevin, if we could, we have a question in the chat room. I want to pivot and talk a little bit about some of our early careerists and what they might be experiencing. The question really asked if we had any consultative advice to offer young professionals who might be just entering the field or pursuing their second position. And it's interesting. I feel for the younger individuals right now that find themselves, caught in what we're all experiencing, COVID. And when I say that, it really is intended to realize how they've been impacted, I think, in some unique ways. If we think about it, a lot of the volunteer opportunities that were, initially available have basically evaporated as because, many of the organizations are only allowing essential employees in organizations. And so the opportunity to shadow and other things may not be there as a result of that in a volunteer fashion. The other thing is we're looking at entry-level opportunities. I do think, continuing to get your foot in the door in any kind of position that it can be to put yourself in that environment. So if, it may not be, you may have an interest in, clinical operations or claims or, a whole different area. But if you can find an opportunity within a entry-level position, within a hospital system, within a physician practice, I would encourage you to take whatever position you can to get your foot in the door and then begin to traverse yourself around in that organization. Also, I think it's a great time to spend networking right now. There are a lot of people that are working virtually. People are definitely paying attention to LinkedIn. I've been connected and people are using LinkedIn more than I've ever seen before. And so they should use every opportunity, I would imagine, to network with individuals, begin to send out invites to see if they can have informal conversations, get to know people, take advantage of people not having to fly with people around the country. And you get a chance to probably connect with a lot of people you may not traditionally be able to do so. So for me, I think I would encourage you to pivot and make this an opportunity to utilize the tools and technology to expand your network beyond those locally within your community, and you can talk to people nationally. And if you can find any opportunity, even if it may not be in an area of specialty or you have focus, to get your foot in the door in healthcare, I would encourage you to do so.
Great, thank you, Deanna, and thank you for the question.
Yeah.
Let's get over to our last quadrant here and talk a little bit about timing, which we all know as we go through our lives, our seasons of life, things change and priorities change because of where we are in that journey. So what I'd like to do here is, kind of get to you, Deanna, just to get us started and think about what are some of those common factors you are hearing about. It may be, if you can kind of segment it into where people are in the progression of their career, their life, and how that changes and interrelates with the rest of these three quadrants.
So, common factors, thinking about where you are, and let's say, for example, if you have been, hyper-focused on, kind of climbing the career ladder and chasing that brass ring for years, compensation may have been one that was critically important to you and that you focused on. But again, now as you found yourself in the latter part of your career, you really begin to value different things. And you may find it that you're then looking for something that fuels more of an impact. You might be thinking about your own professional legacy and what you might be leaving in the industry. And so again, those things begin to modify how you now evaluate different things, and then obviously what you're looking for. I also think too, just as you think about your sphere of influence and those that you work with, I do think that I hear a lot of people, even though I've worked around the country for years, here's an opportunity, I may be able to go back to my home state and do some work in my home state that I never really thought of before. But, that opportunity to kind of have that impact is now important. The other piece is I'm a working mother, a proud working mom, and I will tell you that no sacrifice I ever had to make for my children has kind of come back to me tenfold, and I've been blessed by it. But I think there have been a number of leaders, and I won't just say women leaders, just leaders that have made decisions throughout their career based upon the greater good of the family. And now some of those things may shift, much like in my case where I'm an empty nester, makes it different. I also realize there's some individuals who, different states offer different tiered benefits. If you have children with special needs, you might want to target a certain geography just based upon how the resources that can be offered there. So Kevin, there are just a myriad of things that can kind of go into that equation. And again, it'll ebb and flow based upon where you are personally and professionally, as well as the greater good. And, I didn't mention it, but I think we all have been dealing with aging parents. Being able to be nearby and provide support for aging parents is a critical one that I often hear people sharing. I'm dealing with it in my life as well. And so to me, those are some of the common trends that I'm seeing.
Yeah. And Tim, what about you? I know as you apply these conversations and talking with people, I mean, when we engage candidates, there's always a level of, are they sticky to the organization? Do they have too many other things that are going to keep them potentially where they are, besides the wonderful pull from their employers? But as it relates to timing, Tim, what are the things that you find most commonly come out in those conversations?
Yeah, I think Deanna highlighted a number of them. I think for the purpose of the application or even personal reflection, there's almost two different components here. There are the family items, age of children's, aging parents, significant other, what's going on in the significant other, do they work out of the home, what's going on in their career, all of those things are changing. And as Deanna said, they change over time. When you're empty nesters, it's different than when you have teenagers. It may be different when they're young. So the ability to kind of think about those things do shift with time. Timing on the professional front is more than I'm just busy. Timing is extremely acute as if somebody's in transition. Timing has a sense of urgency, but inevitably timing has a lot to do with that horizontal peer ceiling. Did they get promoted? Did they not get promoted? Timing can be, is the division potentially going to be spun out? So there's a whole host of professional things around. Maybe they've been in the role for a while and they're just really ready to do something different. So again, for the purpose of the discussion, it's less about that this has to be rigid, and it's more about the ability to think about these factors that are playing themselves out in all those discussions as it relates to what's going on behind the scenes when you are recruiting someone to your organization and what they may be trying to solve for. As I said, three of these things can exceed someone's expectation. If any one of them doesn't pass, it's not going to work out. So I can't share, there's just more than I can count how many times somebody would say, that is ideally what I want to do. I am ready for that. But my situation is such that I can't move, and therefore I can't be in that geography, so timing isn't going to work. Or, maybe it's no longer relo, maybe they're really energized to do something different, but at the end, they just had expectations of compensation that was at a level than maybe what an opportunity will produce. So again, applied loosely, but thought of in a combination. The hope is that, as you think about the timing piece, this is when you shut the notepad or you set down the review and you just have a conversation and you just spend time just really trying to get to know the person and what's going on in their world, and in a way that has you really connected with your team member, or really truly getting to know somebody who you're looking at adding to the team.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. The other thing too is, as we've talked about this and we think about it, so if we put ourselves in the position, of our audience and where they are today, so at the end of the day, there's no one singular equation, as we talk about in our algorithm, that says, if these things are all in and, equal balance, then it would make sense for me to make a move. And in addition to timing, as Tim talked about, no two are congruently equal at all times. They will vary. So as you think about the need for, when does it make sense for me to make a move? These things are a part of that equation. But I guess the other piece that's also an overlay that maybe we haven't talked about as much is, what would kind of give me the extenuating circumstance to say, yes, this is the time I should make this move. And I think it's innate to everything we talked about, and it's challenge. I don't want to get too much into some of the retention, because that's going to be some of the things we talk about in part 2 of our webinar series. But if you think about the core challenge that somebody's looking at, we get often asked, well, this might be looked at, or is it going to be perceived as being a lateral move for me to move to this position? How do I evaluate, should I stay where I am today, or is this a good move that I should make, or would it be a potential derailer if someone to go back and look at my resume and consider that move? And I think, what we tend to see often, and where I encourage as I advise and coach leaders in the industry, it really does go down to the root cause of challenge. If you feel like you're no longer being challenged in your role, you don't feel like you can learn from the people that you're working with, you've maybe outgrown the role, outgrown the ability to grow and be developed in that, that to me is an ideal time where you should be looking for that next step. And as we've often encouraged people, sometimes that next step may be something that may move you into a lateral move. Let's say that I feel like I'm not being challenged in my current role, but because of circumstances going on in my life, it plays into timing that I'm not able to physically relocate, but my organization is offering me another role in a different department that I feel like is going to offer me some new challenge, perhaps even make me feel like I'm bringing new value in different ways. Then that's a move you most certainly should take. I do think as long as you can continue to fill your toolkit with new experiences, and continue to grow, those what may be deemed or perceived to be a lateral opportunity could be an enriching opportunity that would give you new life and energy to continue to work within that organization.
On that point, Deanna, I think that's a great point, because how many times have we worked with senior executives who are moving into the C-suite, whether it's a COO or a CEO role, or they've switched from nursing to operations or whatever it might be. And sometimes to make the move from one, I don't want to call it a pillar, but from one career path into another that gets you more elevated, you do need to make those moves, even just in logically and methodically and thoughtfully managing one's career growth. So it's a very good point. So great. Thank you, Tim and Deanna. This has been a great conversation. What I want to do is, we had one question. If there are any other questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A. I've enjoyed this conversation, and I would like to kind of put in a little plug. As Deanna said, we've got part 2 of this seminar coming up next week, and this will be more on that retention side and, thinking about your employees or high potentials, those that you hopefully you want to retain all of them, but sometimes not. But really be thinking about that, and a pipeline that, from where the word we would use is unpoachable. As we many times call candidates, the last thing they're doing is looking for a role. And it has to be a pretty compelling opportunity for them to engage, unless for some reason they're not engaged in their organizational culture and the work they're doing. So it's just a little bit different perspective from where we sit, but we look forward to that. Deanna, Tim, any other thoughts or comments before we let people get back to their day jobs?
No, I would just say, thank you all the participants for your time and interest. Do know at the end of the day, we always enjoy our conversations. And for us, it's not just about we're calling you sometimes to have a conversation around an opportunity. Anything we can do to help support your career growth within your current organizations is very important to us as well. So just appreciate your trust and support.
Yeah, well said.
Yes, we're here. As I just say to people, let us be a resource, whatever that means to you as a professional. And those relationships are the number one thing that drives us in our business.
Great.
So, great. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon and a wonderful weekend, and enjoy Halloween, however that will happen for you in your location this year.
Yeah, I think we're going to turn it over to Melanie. You may have any closing remarks?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for joining us and bearing with in the initial technical challenges. The conversation was excellent, and we hope that everyone registers for part 2 next week, which will occur at noon next Friday. Enjoy your weekend, stay safe, and thank you to our friends at First Group and Newburgh Partners. Bye,
Appreciate
everyone.
it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.